Rannin sat on the old metal bench, shivering, his clothes soaking and wet from the pouring rain. He gazed lamentably at the rain in the gutter, bound only by the pull of gravity. Suddenly the rain stopped falling on his head. Confused, he looked up, seeing the black polymer of an umbrella's canopy. A human woman with shockingly red, waist-length hair sat next to him, clad in a simple pilot's outfit. She smiled at him, holding out a takeout box and an eating utensil. Rannin slowly took the container, clumsily pulling it open with cold fingers. Fragrant steam rose from the pile of fried and sauced poultry, making Rannin's empty stomach gurgle with hunger. Without a second thought, he reached into the container and pulled out a handful of the poultry pieces before stuffing them in his mouth. He chewed just enough so he wouldn't choke before swallowing, going back for more and more until the container was empty. Rannin looked down at the container in embarrassment, still hungry, but not wanting to ask for more food. A stranger's kindness was not to be taken for granted. "Here, kid, eat up. Your face says it all." Rannin turned his head in surprise as the human woman pulled another container from the bag looped around her wrist. Rannin didn't know what to say as he gingerly took the piping hot container, expecting the woman to hit or yell at him like his parents used to. But the woman just smiled and kept talking, the umbrella floating above them by itself with a whoosh of pressurized air. "You're a Rallet, right? From Ralia. Let me guess. Your parents kicked you out instead of throwing you a party for your birthday?" Rannin nodded, using the eating utensil to shove small piles of a sticky white grain into his face. He truthfully didn't want to talk about it, but would return the stranger's kindness with answers. The woman nodded softly, pulling a pack of cigarettes and a lighter from her jacket's breast pocket. She lit one and took a long drag as she watched the rain. "I understand that. My parents kicked me out when they found out I liked women. I was only 16 then." The woman chuckled as though she told a joke. "Some parents are just shit people, kid. Don't let them define your life." Rannin looked over at the human woman as she calmly smoked her cigarette, her eyes moist with held-back tears. Swallowing his mouthful of food, he softly stated, "I'm sorry you went through that, truly, but please don't pity me. It's customary in my culture for the chick to leave the nest upon maturity." Feeling the tears well up in his own eyes, he quickly buried his face back in the food. The woman's warm hand gently took him by the chin and turned his face towards her. He had been trying to hide the black eye his dad had gave him on his way to throw him out the door. The woman's face softened, but there was a hardness in her eyes. "Maybe so, but that isn't. No parent should hit their child ever. That's for other kids to do before they know better." Rannin felt himself begin to cry and just keeled forward, letting the strange woman wrap a consoling arm around him as his tears dropped into a puddle. The woman softly patted his shoulder, quietly asking, "Do you have any siblings?" Rannin shook his head. "Do you want revenge?" He bolted upright, looking at the human woman in shock. Unable to answer, he was supposed to honor his family, bring glory to their name, to defend the clan at all cost. But was a clan who beat their only child for crying from hunger worthy of honor? The parents who bought booze and drugs instead of feeding their child, did they deserve glory? Did they deserve for him to defend them? He took a deep breath and made eye contact with the woman, noticing the sharp green of her eyes. I do. I want them to pick on someone their own size for once." The woman nodded and patted him on the back. "Good. You should. Let's go get some." Rannin stood quickly as the human woman bolted to her feet, exclaiming, "I don't even know your name, and you're gonna help me get revenge? How do you even plan on taking a fully grown Rallet on and survive?" The woman smiled. "My name is Captain Leandra Noctok of the VFS FAFO. As for how well, I'm a volunteer." That only answered one of Rannin's questions. Captain Leandra hummed as she knocked on the dingy apartment's door. The poor kid she'd picked up looked at Bobby with awe and terror. She didn't blame him. The gentle giant used to be part of Ferrick's crew. He was truly a sight to behold at nearly 8 feet tall, and with muscles the size and density of bowling balls. The armored chest plate made of battleship decking made him truly terrifying. The door opened, revealing a visibly drunk and groggy adult male Rallet. "Who is you, bitch?" Leandra smiled and asked, "Are you Rannin's father?" The Rallet seemed to grow suspicious. "Yeah, what's it to you?" Leandra's grin just grew wider as she ducked her head forward, Bobby's brick-sized fist sailing through where her head used to be and into the adult male Rallet's face. The heavy bipedal was launched backwards, taking the doorknob with them, before they smacked into the cinder block wall opposite the door, making the building shake before they slumped into a heap, its large, hog-like nose visibly broken and bleeding. Leandra straightened her back and looked at Bobby, confusion writ on her face. "How fucking hard did you hit him, Bobby? Their bones can withstand .50 BMG point blank, and you probably just broke a dozen." The giant hefted his fist, bicep bulging. "It was just a love tap, Captain." The sarcasm dripped from the giant's slow, thick words. Captain Leandra nodded, brow furrowed as she stepped into the apartment. A Rowlett woman lay slumped on the couch, a needle still in her arm as she snored. She hadn't even stirred as her husband was launched across the room. Leandra felt her heart sink. This was too much like home for her. Before she could cry for her siblings, she turned and strolled calmly out of the apartment, beckoning the two boys to follow her. Her face impassive, she calmly took out a cigarette and lit it in the elevator. "Welcome to the volunteers, kid. 3 square meals a day are guaranteed. You put your due diligence in and you'll be paid accordingly. Tax-free, of course. We are a non-profit." Leandra stubbed her cigarette out as the mesh door of the elevator rattled open. She always liked giving those speeches. Captain Leandra gasped awake in the medbay, the bullet wounds in her gut and chest bandaged and healing. A rough 4-fingered hand held her left hand, a soft 5-fingered one held her right. She raised her head, seeing the smiling hog-like face of Rannon as he put a finger to his lips before smiling around his one intact tusk, the other snapped off at about the midpoint. She remembered now. The refugee drawing the gun just as the relief shuttle's doors were opened, how the rounds burnt as they ripped through her. Then, how Rannon stepped in front of her, the gunman firing at Rannon's vulnerable face, managing to take off half a tusk before the gun jammed and Rannon's fist closed around their head. She had to admit, she felt kind of bad for the gunman after Rannon dragged him across the bay by his face. She smiled and gently caressed the cheek of the man she proudly called her adopted son. "Good job not crushing his head." He smiled. "He wished I did after Helga got a hold of him." Leandra smiled at her dark-haired, heavy sleeper of a wife. Her knuckles were bruised and swollen. "Do I want to know what she did to that poor bastard?" Rannon sincerely shook his head. "I've never seen her that pissed before, and I think that guy's going to be pissing blood for a week." Leandra nodded and gently ruffled her wife's short, dark brown hair. She joked softly. "I married a Yandere, didn't I?" Helga grumbled her agreeance and scrunched her face into the blankets on Leandra's legs before bolting upright. "You're alive! Oh my goodness, never do that to me again. I broke 2 of Bobby's fingers when he tried to pull me off that guy." Rannon looked at his other mother with concern. Leandra just smiled and laughed softly before becoming playfully stern. "You apologized, right?" Helga's head bobbed rapidly. "Yup. Cooked him 50 pounds of turkey legs just the way he likes them." "I bet he enjoyed that." Rannon nodded, seeming to stare off into the distance. "That man consumes poultry at an unholy pace. It was all gone in less than 15 minutes. Both women looked at him with apologies written across their faces. They both knew the terror that came from watching a 4-foot-tall pile of turkey legs disappear into one man's stomach. Rannon simply stared off into space. "Where the fuck does Uncle Bob put it all?"